Welcome back to the Martinliedtke channel. Glad you could be here today, guys. Today, we're going to look into the darker side of the brothers Grimm, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, German brothers who are renowned storytellers. Everybody in the world certainly knows these people's stories, but there are some sinister things that you may not know about them. This is going to be spooky. We're going to look into the world of the Grimm brothers. Now, they translated oral traditions of fairy tales or folklore from the German peoples, and they released 200 of these stories, these old world stories, in the year of 1812. Now, it was a really interesting year, 1812. This is the year of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and even Bram Stoker's Dracula, all written at the same time, 1812. And then the Grimm brothers, if they are brothers, we'll look at that later, they've published 200 stories. Now, some of these stories I have admittedly never heard of, but a lot of them we have heard of, but they are sinister. And the original editions were watered down later to make them more child-friendly, even though they weren't. But there's some stuff that we should learn, maybe, about the Grimm brothers and the way writing and language works. It's quite sinister indeed. Bear with me. So, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. We all know this story, don't we? He helps the villagers of Hamelin and clears them of rats, but he takes away all the children. There is some sinister things going on with all of these stories. There is Cinderella, who is a mistreated young girl, who, she's cleaning the hot coals of the fire. And the girl, she triumphs over this. This is with the help of magic birds and a golden slipper. Okay. There are also Hansel and Gretel, siblings who outwit a cannibalistic witch who lives in a gingerbread house. Okay. There's also Little Red Riding Hood. So a girl encounters a cunning wolf on her way to visit a grandmother's house, and then a grandmother is suddenly changed into maybe a wolf. All the better to eat you with. More cannibalistic behavior. And these are watered down. Rumpelstiltskin. That's probably one of the most sinister tales. A mysterious imp helps a girl spin gold. She's been instructed that she has to spin gold or she will die. But this imp, he makes a terrible price to the young lady. He wants her firstborn. Okay, it's a really sinister tale because he says that you can only outdo this contract, this bargain, if you guess my name. But luckily enough, a herdsman overheard him skipping away through the forest going, "She'll never guess my name, Rumpelstiltskin, Rumpelstiltskin." And then when, the moment came, she said, "Yeah, dude, you're Rumpelstiltskin." Yeah, and he had to just go where imps go. There was Sleeping Beauty. Oh, right. Look at this. There was Sleeping Beauty. So that was a curse. So you get a lot of witches, a lot of curses, a lot of changelings, a lot of mysterious beings in all of these tales. Old world stuff. A cursed princess sleeps for 100 years until awakened by her true love's kiss. Okay, say so. Jacob Grimm and his brother, you may not know. Okay. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair. They were pioneers in linguistics. That's what they did. They were academics and they were linguistic experts, and they worked for government, and they were also lecturers, and they formulated what has become known as the Grimm's Law, which describes sound shifts in the evolution of the German languages. Together, they worked on this, and they worked on a German dictionary, which is a massive linguistic project and undertaking that was never completed until well after their deaths. But the technology of these described sound shifts were utilized in these books. The Grimm's tales translated into 160 languages worldwide. Endless movies, endless books, endless everything about these films. That's how big they have become and important. Well, how much do we know about these Grimm brothers? The original editions were far darker, and they were infinitely more violent. Later, they were softened to appeal to children. No, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. What a sinister little story. I haven't got a bad mind, but how many of you have wondered if this is actually okay for a young lady to live with 7 males in a shack in the middle of nowhere? It is odd, isn't it? But all of it is odd. And if the Grimm brothers actually got any children, because they certainly talk about them a lot in their children's tales. No, they were a very odd couple. Let's just say that. Neither of them have married. Well, one of them actually did marry for a very short period in 1927, but for most of their life, if not all of their life, they were lifelong companions, and they were paired in intense scholarly focus and embraced bachelorhood. Okay, I think I know exactly what that means. Somewhere there is dark forces at play behind these two characters, and they have interlayered into these famous stories that we've all grown up with. It's really uncanny how many of these stories we grow up come from German mythos and German folk tales and of Norse tradition. These linguistics, this couple of men, they were looking into Norse mythology, even Aryan mythology, and put it in to these tales. Also, the Dutchman Hans Christian Andersen, Tom Thumb, etc. Also, Germanic stories that have been embraced by the whole world. But you can find these archetypes repeated in other traditions and other countries and other stories anyway. Like Rip Van Winkle, he slept for 100 years, didn't he? So, intense scholarly pursuits. So they were, in fact, decoders. Not only were they decoders, the Grimms, they were pattern recognition experts, by all accounts. So the brothers were inseparable. They shared the same house and their same obsessive scholarly isolation. Isolation necessary to come up with the results that they needed to. The early editions, they were macabre. There was Cinderella, for example. The stepsisters mutilated their own feet to try and fit the slippers. Snow White, her stepmother forced her to dance was forced to dance in red hot iron shoes until she's dead. A bit like the Kate Bush song, Red Shoes. Red Shoes, the ruby slippers, there's a narrative behind them. I wonder if it is about hot iron slippers. As soon as I put them on, I knew that I'd done something wrong. So were they Freemasonic? I can't get no evidence of that. Were they in any secret societies? I can't get any evidence of that, but I can get evidence that they worked with government in linguistics, and they had almost obsessive interest in the occult, and the esoteric, which was intertwined into all of these spooky stories that we all know and we've all grown up with, and kids even in the modern day are growing up with. There are other more sinister stories that I've never heard of. The juniper tree. A boy is murdered and then he's cooked and eaten by his father. In fact, the brothers were obsessed, let's just say obsessed, with the occult. And linguistics and storytelling. What's interesting is the style of storytelling has been adopted even into the modern day. It's been copied. They had a fascination with Norse or Nordic and Teutonic myths and tales of witches, changelings, and otherworldly bargains, which we also often hear of, curses and contracts. Do a deal. Some claimed that they had encoded, which I don't doubt whatsoever, astrological, Kabbalistic, and alchemical symbolism into their tales, like rumpled foreskin. So there are a theme to all of these tales, you'll find. It's of initiation, it's of transformation, coming of age, rite of passage, if you like, transformation, and taboo knowledge. Taboo knowledge. The Grimms were cultural alchemists, I guess you could call them, and they had translated an oral tradition of stories from the peoples, which was an undertaking, but these are folk memory, archetypal patterns replicated in all societies, and all of these stories, I'm guessing, could be recounted in every country. But there is deep symbolic language and meaning, and it affects the collective consciousness. Giants, it's all bits of truth and all bits of the old world knowledge in the fairy tales of the Grimm, Brothers Grimm, linguistic experts in neural linguistic programming, which they used in their fairy tales. This is the house that they actually lived in, apparently the Brothers Grimm. Here they are. Well, one of them's got a nose like a Frenchman and a bit of a curly quiff. I think he's a blonde dude, but he's definitely got a conch like Napoleon and looks very French. The other one, his brother, doesn't even look like him really at all. Different chin, different mouth, different conch. The eyes are pretty similar, but a different size. Not very similar face shape either. If I was to see them in another picture, I wouldn't have thought they were brothers. What if, because, you know, isn't that like a byword, excuse the phrase, bachelor for homosexual? Well, I'm not casting aspersions at these, but I'm just saying it is unusual that they, you know, keep themselves locked away an entire lifetime studying language, making dictionaries, and writing children's stories, which are horrible. Very sinister. So here's Wilhelm, and he's at a university, and he's lecturing children because that on languages, because that is part of what they did. He did. There they are, apparent brothers. But they could have just said that, and they could have had it could all be a constructed past, but they could have just constructed that. But anyway, what a sinister pair. And what they did with language is these two are agents, early agents. If the Tavistock would have existed in Germany back then, propaganda, etc., these were definitely doing that in writings. And they, of Disney, they love the Brothers Grimm. There they are. Looks like a claw. They look nothing alike. Not really. I don't think so. Not at all. But yeah, the Brothers Grimm. Let me know what you think. I'm sure all of you have watched all these movies like Cinderella and all of the rest, and Snow White and Pied Piper and all these other tales, which are all esoterically encoded and all have a deeper meaning. Sinister, isn't it? Let me know what you think in comments. That's all for this show. I will be back on Friday. Let me know what you think in comments. Peace and love, and boom shankar.